Greetings, this is I, Titus Naravan Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome one and all. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day and ready to join me, whether you're joining me live over on Twitch or you're joining me with all of you out there over on YouTube. Hey, those two people, remember, liking, subscribing, ringing the bell, all that great stuff. So my question is today, back to, once again, D&D 4e, because that's what we're talking about today, Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. How many of you out there have played a striker of any kind? I, personally, have played a striker. It was one of the two classes I played. I don't know if I've talked much about it. I do play a little bit of a fighter, a defender. But my main character I played the most of was a Warlock, a striker. So I managed to play through some of one of the main adventure paths. We're going to be diving into information about each of these classes today, the main class of Striker. And I will tell you, there are a few unusual classes that are outside of the purview of what I'm going to talk about today. Basically, rarer sources of information that are from the back end of the 4E timeline that I wasn't able to gather a lot for. I've done this for each of them. I'm going to talk about all the main classes that you can play Striker. I'm going to mention all the other ones. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about hybrid classes. But if you really want to know about hybrid classes, go check my older videos. Anyway, why don't we honestly dive in? Because that's what you're here for. You're here to learn about strikers, whose entire point is to be damage dealers. That's the best way to think about them. Damage dealers. They strike, they hit home. They do a lot of damage very quickly. They're not made to defend themselves. Strikers tend to be a group of characters that is sort of important to the team, but not necessarily the same way as a leader or defender would be. We'll talk about it at the end. Well, why don't we start with the first one? There's a couple of classes from the original Player's Handbook that are strikers, and the first one is Ranger. You're a striker, of course. They either concentrate on two-weapon fighting or ranged attacks that focus on dealing damage to one enemy at a time and high amounts of damage, using speed and mobility to, do hit-and-run tactics. They are a martial group. Strength, dexterity, wisdom are their key ability scores. Give bonuses to fort and reflex. 12 plus con hit points, 5 gained a level, 6 plus con healing surge. So they're warriors who roam the land with, mastering the blade, the bow, doing hit-and-run tactics, eliminating foes as need be. Many have supernaturally keen senses and appreciation for the wilderness, using knowledge of the natural world to track enemies of any kind of scope. And when they catch sight of their quarry, boom! They might take some time hunting it, getting into that perfect shot to take it down. There are two main builds of Rangers that you can check out for examples. Archer Ranger, and of course Two-Blade Ranger. Again, I'm not going to go into details about those two main builds, but if you're looking to basically make an easy build, they suggest stuff for either of those ones. Now for class features, there are a number of things that you get beyond your average powers. You get Fighting Style and Hunter's Quarry. For Fighter Style, you choose one of the two, one of two different ones, at least for in the original Player's Handbook. Again, some things may have been added to certain things, but we'll leave it at that for now. Archer or two-weapon fighting. Archer focuses on range attacks, two-weapon fighting, and focuses on, of course, two-weapon fighting. And you gain bonuses for each of those. Then you also get Hunter's Quarry, which is once per turn. As a minor action, you can designate an enemy your quarry. Once a round, when you deal extra damage to your quarry. It's based on your level, and if you can make multiple attacks on a round, you decide which one applies your extra damage after all the other dice are rolled. It remains into effect until the end of the encounter, until the quarry is defeated, or until you designate a new target as your quarry. And it starts doing a 1d6 extra damage, rise to 2d6, 3d6. You also get, for a third ability, Prime Shot. If none of your allies are nearer to your target than you receive a +1 bonus on range attack rolls against that target. So even if your fighting style does tend to be the two-weapon fighting, you still get this general bonus for ranged. After that, of course, you go into your at-will powers, your encounter powers, your daily powers, and all that. And that's it. That's a Ranger. There's not a lot of complexity to this. The fact is, the Quarry tells you all about what you need to be as a Ranger. You focus down one enemy, dealing extra damage. In particular, your abilities will, well, main to that. And you will see that the different at-will or powers you take will either give the option of ranged or melee, or be just one or the other, depending on the powers you take. And they don't actually connect up with any of your other abilities, so your specific build tends to be what you want it to be. A little bit of advantage there. But again, certain abilities will be specifically ranged, specifically melee, but a lot of them will be one or the other. But that's, honestly, that short bit there is a Ranger. It's one of those things is I really don't have a lot more to talk about with a Ranger. I could go into, and I haven't really gone into, like, their Paragon paths and stuff like that. That's for, you know, further research, leveling up, getting into that. You want to play a Ranger in the first place, and just what Paragon path you take. So let's move on, though, to the Rogue, actually. Let's continue on, because, again, we'll keep it to what we need. If it's simple and sweet, it's simple and sweet. You know, that's the kind of way we're going to have it today. So, Rogue, it's, again, a striker. They dart in to do an attack, do massive damage, and then retreat to safety. So, this is a little bit more, it's hit and run just like Ranger, but they are very melee hit and run. So, they kind of sneak in, strike, and then run out, and then are best teamed with a defender who can basically either flank them to get bonuses or basically to take the heat of their attacks. Another martial one, Dex, Strength, and Charisma as their key ability scores. Only a bonus to Reflex, 12 plus Con. Hit points, 5 gain a level, 6 plus Con for healing surges. So Cunning, Elusive Advertise, slipping in and out of the shadows, passing across the battlefield without fear of reprisal, and then suddenly just driving home their blade when they find that opportunity. There's a lot of preconceived notions about rogues, but your true nature is for you to mulch. Yeah, you could be the agent of a intelligence network of a deposed king, a criminal on the lam, seeking to clear your name, a performer whose goals are to transcend the stage, or a kid that had a turn of bad luck and ended up in this kind of place. A thrill seeker. There's a lot of reasons to be this kind of roguish character. Not just the quintessential thief, though the thief is technically an option in there. Don't forget that one. But that's the very, very traditional preconceived one. But the idea is still you have a blade up your sleeve, a concealing cloak, you know, and kind of keeps people from getting a look at you. There are two main builds from the original Player's Handbook that you can take a look at for some examples. The Brawny Rogue and the Trickster Rogue. Trickster Rogue would be more, you know, backstabby, sneaky. The Brawny one would be more, you know, big smashy. So, as a rogue, you get 4 abilities as class features. First Strike, Rogue Tactics, Rogue Weapon Talent, and Sneak Attack. First Strike, start of the encounter, you have combat advantage against any creatures who have not yet acted in the encounter. So, as a rogue, you want to act first. It's incredibly important because you get that first strike in and get your advantage in. Then you get Rogue Tactics, which in the original Player's Handbook there was 2 different tactics to choose from. Artful Dodger and Brutal Scoundrel. Artful Dodger gives you some bonus to AC against opportunity attacks equal to your Charisma modifier. Brutal Scoundrel is you gain a bonus to sneak attack damage equal to your Strength modifier. These does matter which one you choose. Now, as I said with the kind of Ranger, it really didn't make a difference which style you chose necessarily. For the Rogue, though, which of those either 2 tactics you choose actually will affect some of your powers. So keep that in mind, that certain powers will be better if you are Artful Dodger or Brutal Scoundrel. It will be, you know, take a look and read up and see if those powers will have those bonuses. Some will not have it either way. Some will synergize with your abilities. Then we got Rogue Talent, your third ability. We'll finish up a Sneak Attack, of course. You can wield, when you wield a shuriken, Your weapon damage die increases by 1 size. When you wield a dagger, you gain a +1 bonus to attack rolls. This means you want to have shurikens as your thrown weapons, daggers your melee weapons, because you get a bonus to hit with this, and bonus damage with those. It's basically all it does. And that's even if you're using those. And then finally there's sneak attack, which is very similar to what the Ranger had, is once per round, you get this bonus damage. In this case, though, you have to have combat advantage against an enemy, and are using a weapon from the light braid, crossbow, or sling group. And then the attack against that enemy deals extra damage when it hits. You decide when to use that. Of course, you would have to get into combat advantage when you can get that. Flanking really helps. That's why you need that defender there to flank with. That's probably the easiest way. Flank with someone to get that combat advantage. But there are other ways to get combat advantage, and some ways that your allies may grant you combat advantage, so then you do that extra damage. The thing about the rogue is they tend to do more damage. While it was a d6, 2d6, 3d6 for a ranger, a rogue actually does more damage as a bonus. 2d6, 3d6, 5d6. So keep that in mind. You have some disadvantages in comparison to the ranger, but you do more damage with your sneak attack. It is harder to get the sneak attack. You have to set it up better. That's one of your disadvantages, still doing more damage. And then, of course, we get into the powers and all the other stuff, and that's pretty much the basic for your rogue. We'll move on. You know, as much as, again, I could dive into even more about stuff here, I'm sticking to the basics of what you need to know about these classes in order to be like, do I want to play this or not? Now, here is one that I definitely will say will have multiple choices. The Warlock. This is the one I played. Welcome. So, Strikers. Again, you're doing a lot of damage, but as a Warlock, thank you. You're going to have supernatural abilities, things like pact abilities, teleporting, flying, turning invisible, that, like, you know, okay, the Ranger's running around, the Rogue's being stealthy, what's a Warlock doing? Magic shit, you know. You're an arcane one, we're our first arcane striker that we've had the entire time. All of them have been martial up till now. Charisma, Constitution, Intelligence, bonus Reflex Will, 12 plus con, hit points 5 gain per level, 6 plus con. You see the pattern here for when it comes to hit points and stuff. So yes, Warlocks deal with a certain type of enemy, some kind of primeval enemy entity of the universe. Channel that energy and use it for do stuff. Now, the main ones that they have are Infernal Intelligence and Face Spirits, but more were added on later on. So if you want to look into more sources in 4th edition, they do exist. But when we just talk about here for the first book, because I don't want to flush around in every goddamn book telling you about this stuff. I'm giving you the basics and educating you here so you know about it. And, you know, welcome everybody. So remember to keep on topic for while we're chatting about this here. We can always get into other conversations afterwards. So yeah, it was a good joke too. Secrets, lore of the universe, whether they're infernal, fey, or something else. The only one I know off the top of my head is like weird Eldritchy Stars one. So I don't know if there's more than those 3, but those are the 3 I know about. The first 2 are here. You learn about this stuff. You get into this pact, have rituals, signs in blood, and destinies and stuff that you've made by being a warlock. You know, there's a lot about it. You know, maybe you made a deal with some kind of strange fae or devil that you made a signed a contract with for your infernal powers. There are 2 basic builds of Warlock that are introduced in here. Of course, the Deceptive Warlock and Scourge Warlock. One deals with one style, the other deals with the other style. I'm not going to, give you which style is which. We'll just keep it at that. Because it depends on your pact. So, as class features, your pact is the major class feature. It is in the book. The 3 in the book. Star Pact's also in the book. So, you get a lot of abilities as a warlock. You get 5 abilities. We'll talk about pacts last, but we'll start with the important one. Everybody that's a warlock gets Eldritch Blast. It's your basic ability, it's your basic attack. Everybody gets it. It's your at-will that all the warlocks get. There's a bunch of things that can actually deal along with the Eldritch Blast stuff, so we'll keep it at that. You get an Eldritch Blast. Awesome. Pew, pew, pew. You get other at-wills, but that's the main one that all of them have. I shoot a thing and explode people. Then you get Prime Shot. If you're the nearest one to a target, you get +1 to range attacks against that target. Basically, I want to be closest to that person to blast them at the time I'm attacking. It's very similar to what we were talking about with the other strikers. You also get Shadow Walk, which is a really interesting ability. If you move at least 3 squares on your turn, you get Concealment until the end of your turn, your next turn. So that means, like, you might want to actually keep moving around and keep Concealment. Help you do. And then, before we talk about the packs, you get Warlock's Curse. So as a minor action, you can place a curse on the enemy nearest to you can see. They're more vulnerable to your attacks and damage. So basically, cursed enemy, you do extra damage to them. You decide what attack roll that you're doing which damage roll you're doing that extra damage on. You get it once per turn. It starts at a d6, goes to 2d6, goes to 3d6. It remains until the end of the encounter or until the curse enemy drops to 0 hit points. And you can place Warlock curses on multiple targets over the course of an encounter. Each time requires a minor action, and you can't place a Warlock curse on a creature that's already cursed. So, unlike the other one, well, Ranger, one at a time. Rogue, had of circumstances. Warlocks, you can just throw out those curses like they're candy, but it's a minor action each time. Just... They do have implements like other arcane casters, and, you know, yes, we can talk about their powers. Let's talk about their Eldritch packs, though, because there are 3. Now, I'm going to mention each of the packs, but I'm going to tell you what you get for a pact. When I make a deal with a mysterious dark entity that's probably not in it for my own good, what do I get of it? Well, you know, the 3 that are in the original Player's Handbook are Fey, Infernal, and Star Pact, and they give you, first off, determines one of your at-will spells. So, yeah, you get Eldritch Blast, and you get whatever your pact ability is for your at-will spells. That's it. You know, there are other ways to get other ones, but, you know, that's where you kind of start out. You also get a Pact Boon. What's a Pact Boon? Well, it basically grants you another power related to your hexing of your enemy, your Warlock Curse. The Pact also has certain powers that give bonuses to. If you choose an Infernal power, that would get a bonus to being an Infernal Pact. Like, anybody can take the Infernal power, but being part of the Infernal Pact, you get a bonus. There's some Fey powers that are more Fey-related. Anybody can take them, but you get a bonus for that. So the Fey Pact gives you Misty Step, which is an eye bite. You know, you're connecting with a Fey, a nature spirit. And the Misty Step is a teleportation ability. The Infernal Pact, hey, you're connecting with devils. You get Dark One's Blessing and Hellish Rebuke. Dark One's Blessing is when an enemy dies, you get some vitality. And then Star Pact, it gives you Dire Radiance. And Fate of the Void, which when an enemy is reduced to 0, you gain a bonus to a d20 in the next roll that you make. So basically, you steal part of their soul and use it to fight against them. So yeah. And there we go. That's the Warlock. Again, I'm not going to go into stuff that was released in other books. I'm just going over the basics here so you have an idea about it. I'm not going to go into details about powers or Paragon Paths. But you can see how each of these strikers functions. They are made for damage output and to get bonus damage against individual targets. Most of their abilities do tend to be very individually targeted. So always keep a lot of that in mind. I'm just going to give a little summary of my Warlock build. It was a lot of abilities that did one hit and stuff like that. A lot of single target abilities. And there is a Warlock feat you can take later on that if you miss with an encounter power, you can take damage and retain it to use it again. And basically, I would just use my early level encounter powers a lot in the course of combat and keep them if I missed with them. So it was a very interesting build that I had. But I digress. Just wanted to give that because I have played for a pretty long campaign, Striker. It was my longest campaign, was my Warlock. Chiron. Now let's move on to book 2, our second book, of course. And we'll start with Sorcerer. Now, I'm actually just going in order that a listing of all the striker classes online gave me. So that's why we are talking about this before the other 2 strikers in this book. But yeah, they're not alphabetically going to be listed. But Sorcerer is one of the more interesting because it's another arcane one, and it's very different from your previous arcane striker. You're still channeling arcane energies to blast your enemies. You're still arcane magic, charisma, dexterity, strength are key abilities, bonuses to will, 12 plus con, 5, 6 plus con for your healing related stuff. So, they wield raw, mystical power that bursts out. It's not through rigorous training, but harnessing it through their blood they've tapped and shaped. You know, we talked about how, you know, Warlock makes a deal, a wizard's doing through learning. A sorcerer has some form of blood in them, something in their blood which grants them their magic. And they burst it out, bursting from their veins. The basic builds that you can go into, which, again, up to you, which there's a Chaos Sorcerer and a Dragon Sorcerer in here, if you want some example builds. But you do get, then, a Spell Source, and that really gives you most of your stuff as a Sorcerer. I'm not going to lie, your Spell Source really implies a lot. And then you can also use Arcane Implements like any Arcane Caster can. So, the 2 that are given in the original Player's Handbook 2 were Dragon Magic and Wild Magic. So, I kind of am going to go into each of these a little bit because it shows you how they're very different for sorcerers, and it will give you an idea how they work as their own unique strikers. Again, we have an idea of how their powers are going to be. Their powers are all going to be about single target high damage. That's the point of them. But also, it is important to note that strikers, well, this sorcerer is a striker that has a little bit of control as a secondary power. So keep that in mind. That's something that we didn't see in the Player's Handbook 1 strikers. They really are very pure striker. Sorcerer's the first point in time where we're a striker first, but we have a little bit of that controller in there with battlefield manipulation, multiple target hitting, probably just to keep it at things. Like, even like some of the daily powers of a Warlock will hit multiple targets, but those are big daily powers. Sorcerer will have some lesser things that'll tend to hit them. Draconic Magic. Draconic Magic. Get a bonus to damage rolls of arcane powers equal to your strength modifier. Turns out being a dragon helps out a lot. And your strength modifier increases as you level up, too. I'm just going to punch things with my spells. I guess that's why they do it. You also get Draconic Resilience. When you're not wearing heavy armor, you add your strength in place of dexterity or intelligence to AC. Interestingly enough. And then Dragon Soul, choose a damage type, and you regain resistance to that damage type that also levels up. And then, of course, Scales of the Dragon, where when you become bloodied in an encounter, basically reduced to half hit points, you get a +2 bonus to AC. So here's the thing about it. We're not getting a lot of the same kind of striker stuff that we got with the previous strikers. The big thing here is, 1, I'm getting a lot of abilities that make me be able to be in the front line. Bonuses to strength with arcane power, bonuses to AC, resistance to elemental types. I'm bursting stuff around me, you know. There's a lot of that, you know, it's raw, punchy magic, and it's interesting. Let's talk about wild magic. We can compare this here. They're very strange and unique and interesting. So, elemental chaos is your blood. You get Chaos Burst. Looking pretty good. Welcome, Nerdy Sakura. Hello. The first attack roll each of your turns determines a benefit you get in the round. If you roll an even number, you get a bonus to AC. If you roll an odd number, you can make a saving throw. Again, you have to know how saving throws work in 4E, but it's a very odd thing of, like, it reminds me a little bit of that Chaos Mage or Wild Magic in 5th edition. Chaos Power, you gain a bonus to damage rolls equal to your dexterity modifier, and your dexterity goes up. So it's another one that it relies on another ability score where you're, rather than rolling extra dice, you're adding like a ability score number to powers that aren't normally related to that. You get Unfettered Power when you roll nat 20 on attack roll of Arcane Power. You slide the target 1 and knock it prone. On a natural one of the attack roll, you push each other within 5 squares of you 1 square. Each creature basically push. And then you've got a Wild Soul, which determines damage type. When after you basically have an extended rest, you roll your Wild Soul and you resist damage of that type. But it's random after a long rest. So it's, am I resisting thunder right now? Force, lightning, necrotic, poison? I don't know. We'll roll and find out. So there's definitely the wild magic is very much like the, wild magic of 5e. But, you can see the essence of the striker there, the extra power, damage, hitting, when you are relying on, count them, 2 ability scores, charisma, and then either strength or dexterity, because all of your abilities are going to be charisma based, and all of your abilities are normally going to add charisma to damage. But depending on your type, maybe you also add strength, or maybe you also add dex to damage. And that's the interesting bits of adding 2 ability scores. You're not rolling an extra dice, but you are getting those 2 ability scores, and your ability scores will go up as you level. So Sorcerer's a really interesting striker there. Let's talk about the Avenger. Looking very dark and shady there. So again, we're still a striker. That's cool. The Arcane Trickster Rogue is very nice. I don't think I played an Arcane Trickster personally, but I will at one point in time. I played a few rogues, but I try to rotate through classes. So, we're Divine Striker as an Avenger. Cool. We haven't had one of those. We've all been our Martial and Arcane. We're finally being the basically Striker of the Divine. You bring divine wrath on the enemies of your god. Devastation to them. And a little bit of Controller as a secondary role. Basically, you practice mysteries forgotten by your religious order. Welcome again. Wisdom, Dex, Intelligence are key ability scores. Bonus to Fort, Reflex, and Will. 14 plus Con, 6 gain per level, 7 plus Con, Healing Surges. A little bit different than before. So basically, this is the idea of an Avenger, someone that's dealing into esoteric secrets and ancient traditions of a religious organization. They're these champions, deadly warriors for their divine that have sworn to execute divine vengeance on their enemies of your god kind of thing. You've trained in some kind of monastery to learn these things, understand your god's foes, and bringing your might down against them to smite them utterly and completely. We're doing good. Doing good. Or Alonso. Or, Alonso. Okay. Got it right. So you do get... Okay. Get implements. Well, they're divine implements. The example Avengers, of course, are Isolating Avenger and Pursuing Avenger. Going well. Talking about 4E D&D a little bit here, and Strikers. A type of class from them. For deities and alignment are kind of a thing. You have to be kind of an alignment that's compatible with the deity. If you're serving a good deity, you have to be a good character. If you're being kind of a lawful good, you have to be lawful good. It kind of is supposed to be like that. And you really do have to kind of define a pantheon for this type of character. So that's something to work out with your GM. So just keep that in mind. This is a religious type character. Now you do get 4 abilities as an Avenger. First off, you get Armor of Faith. So, while you are wearing heavy armor and not using a shield, while you're wielding neither heavy armor nor wielding a shield, you get +3 bonus to AC. So it's like if you don't get that heavy armor, if you're not getting shielded up, you get a bonus to defenses. You also get a Channel Divinity. It's an encounter power. You start with 2 of them. The powers are Abjure, Undead, and Divine Grace. You get additional divinity powers by taking divinity feats. Channel Divinity. Hey, clerics had that. You do have Abjure Undead, though, is dealing damage to undead. And Divine Guidance is when a targeting ally, you have them make a secondary attack roll. And use the results of that one, basically. If someone makes an attack roll, and maybe they miss, maybe they don't, you can make them re-roll it. Take that one. Pennsylvania. Oath of Enmity, USA. So you get the Oath of Enmity power. Again, it's another encounter power. You choose an enemy, one of them in a burst. And when you make a melee attack against that target, and the target is the only enemy adjacent to you, you make 2 attacks and use either result. And that effect lasts until the end of the encounter or until the target drops below 0. Cool. Well, nice to have you here. A little later than I normally stream, but we're talking about some stuff in D&D. I do these tabletop streams on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and before I do other gaming stuff on Fridays. So basically the idea about this one is it's not really adding extra damage. It's allowing you to have more likely to hit. Your Oath of Enmity means I'm rolling twice. I'm taking 2d20s, and I'm rolling both of these 20s, and I'm taking whichever one I want to of my Oath of Enmity. It's rather than straight up damage, it's accuracy is the bonus you're getting as the striker here. If something else allows you to roll twice, use the higher results when making an attack roll. This power has no effect on the attack. If something forces you to roll twice and use the lower result, the power has no effect on the attack either. So if something else affects the luck of your roll, it supersedes this power. Just keep that in mind. If something else then allows you to re-roll an attack after it's been rolled, and you rolled twice using Oath of Enmity, you get to roll both of them again. It's pretty awesome. So you can see how Oath of Enmity is definitely focusing an Avenger in a certain area. That's one of the main abilities that makes you an Avenger. Cool. So then you get Avenger Censure. This is your class option thing, where you choose kind of how your Avenger powers will be mixed around with. And again, certain powers in Avenger will be affected by your Censure that you take. It's how you're training your mind and body. There's the Censure of Pursuit and Censure of Retribution. The Censure of Pursuit, if your Oath of Enmity target moves away from you willingly, you get a bonus to damage to the target equal to 2 plus your Dex mod until the end of your next turn, which levels up. And which basically it's like, you want to run away? I'll smack you more. And the Censure of Retribution, you're keeping them in control in there in front of you. And the Censure of Retribution is when any enemy other than your Oath of Enmity targets you, you gain bonus damage to your rolls against your Oath of Enmity target equal to your Intelligence modifier until your next turn. The bonus is cumulative on that end. So it's basically if other people are beating you up, you can basically keep in that anger and use it on your target for one big hit. And if they keep hitting you, it's more times you get to add your Intelligence modifier to damage there. I'd say if you want to be chat around on the Discord first, which is linked, and then we can see about friend requests and stuff. I don't normally accept those right away until I get to know some people. But again, I want to chat around on the Discord a little bit and get to know you, then I'll consider it. But that's the essence of what an Avenger is. It's an interesting striker that focuses more on your attack rolls rather than your damage rolls. And it still makes sure that you're hitting more. Well, in this case, it's rather than having really big hits at normal bonus, it's trying to hit more. So maybe the damage isn't as much as some of the other strikers, but the accuracy is what makes an Avenger interesting and unique. All right. We're a pretty good chunk of the way through strikers. There are a few more that I can actually talk about before we talk about what some of the other options are that I can't really go into details about and multi-classing and stuff like that to finish up today. But Barbarian is the last one from Player's Handbook 2. They're a Primal Striker. Hey, we get a Primal one too. You're a champion of the natural world. They use powerful two-handed weapons to do serious damage. So now we've gotten into a different build entirely. Now we're basically like big smashy hits that do huge damage for one hits. They're physical, daunting, and they can temporarily increase their abilities in great bursts to kind of smash into it. Again, that's something in Discord. Chat on the Discord. If you have any ideas or suggestions, save it for there. Key ability scores: Strength, Con, Charisma. Bonus to Fortitude. 15 plus Con, hit points 6. Gained per level. 8 plus Con for healing surges. So you're savage warriors that have these mighty blows, going from foe to foe, not feeling the pain of strikes against them, and just battling it out. That kind of brawl, drag terror into your enemies around their raging spirit. Powerful link to natural spirits that empower them with strength. That is the essence of a barbarian. Now, their two basic builds are the Rage Blood Barbarian and the Thaneborn Blood Barbarian. But for class abilities, you gain 4. You start with Barbarian Agility. If I'm not wearing heavy armor, I get a bonus to AC and Reflex defense, which increases as I level. You also get Feral Might. Here's your class choice ability, which again, we talk about this. There was a class that this doesn't come up in. Remember when we talked about Rogue, your choice didn't matter. This one's another one that most of them, they do. Like, you make a choice, and certain powers are better when you use them related to that choice for your Feral Might. It's how you connect with the natural world. And again, certain powers will have certain bonuses depending on which one you choose. There's Rage Blood Vigor and Thaneborn Triumph. Hey, it's your two builds that they mentioned there. So, Rage Blood Vigor, you gain Swift Charge power. And when you reduce an enemy to 0 hit points, you gain 10 per hit points. You can do a Con modifier. And that levels up how much you gain as you level. Also, like, it goes from 5 plus Con, 10 plus Con. The Thane Blood is you gain the Roar of Triumph power. In addition, when you bloody an enemy, basically reduced to half hit points, the next attack against you or an ally against that enemy gains a bonus equal to your Charisma modifier. Have a good one. Nice for you to stop by. Rage Strike. Urgh. It's a daily attack power that has the... Basically, okay. A Barbarian's daily attack powers have the Rage keyword, allowing you to unleash powerful bursts of emotion, willpower, and primal energy. Each Rage power starts with a mighty attack, and then you enter a Rage, which grants you an ongoing benefit. At 5th level, you gain the Rage Strike power, which lets you channel an unused Rage power into a devastating attack while you're raging. When using the Rage Strike, it is alternative to use a second Rage power in a climactic bower. It gives you, using Rage Strike is basically an alternative to basically, instead of using a second Rage power, it gives you damage output of the daily power without forcing you to enter a different rage. So, every daily power you have will not only hit something, gives you a rage that you're going into, which grants you bonuses to everything. So that's kind of a thing like, if I'm going to start out a battle and I know I'm going to use a daily, I use it right away to enter my rage. Boom, I'm in my rage, I get my bonuses, it affects all my, at-wills, my encounter powers, it gives me that bonus of the rage I chose. But you also get that Rage Strike power at 5th level, which allows you to convert other dailies into hits, rather than have them be powers which will hit and change your rage. So you can stick with the rage you want and you chose for that battle. So keep that in mind. An interesting way of affecting and giving you a rage. I'll actually give an example of this just to, explain it a little better. We'll look at the Blood Hunt Rage. It's a first level daily invocation, daily power. It does 3 weapon plus strength modifier, half damage on miss. We enter the rage of the Blood Hunt. Until the rage ends, you gain a bonus to melee damage equal to your Constitution modifier if either you or your target is bloodied. So there you go. That's it. You gain that bonus. And then, of course, at 5th level, you gain Rage Strike, which is one creature. You hit it, and based on the rage power you're expending to use Rage Strike depends on its damage. That's it. And you can use that power twice a day, where you can basically convert daily rages over. But you don't gain daily powers very often. You get 1, 5, 9, 15, 19, 25, 29. So you will have some more dailies, but we'll also explain that. I think there's a maximum number of dailies as you level up. You kind of replace things. That's an entirely different thing. Anyway, last of the abilities is Rampage, which is once per round when you score a critical hit with Barbarian attack power, you immediately make a melee base attack against as a free action on the target. It doesn't have to be the same target that you scored the critical against. It just has to be there. So there you go. That kind of gives you an idea. The rage gives you a bonus where, depending on the rage you enter, depends on your daily powers. There's like a... Again, this is a bonus to damage, but it's not dice to damage kind of striker. And you can see how the different strikers function this way. There is a little bit of defending or leadership as a secondary abilities as a barbarian, depending on if you're Rage Blood or Thane Blood. Rage Blood is a little bit more defender, the bonus hit points, the temporary hit points, and Thane Blood, giving those extra attacks, is a bit leader. And you will have abilities that will kind of be, you're still being a striker, but you're giving a little bit of those secondary abilities there, to a degree. Alright. Now, for most of the main big ones, we have a couple little bit more to talk about, but Monk is the only striker in Player's Handbook 3. The only one. No other strikers in Player's Handbook 3. None others to talk about. They are a psionic, though, in 4E. Interestingly enough, that they have mind powers, a little different than for their source than a lot of other times that they've kind of been. And they skew weapons for unarmed strikes, avoid armor in exchange for mobility and agility. They strike and kind of have poise on the battlefield, kind of hitting in and out as they need. Strength, wisdom, I'm sorry, dex, strength, and wisdom as bonuses. Fort, reflex, will. Con, 15 plus, 12 plus con, 5, 7 plus con for the stuff. Anyway, so from some mountaintop to the deep alleys in a city's meanest district, these ascetic warriors that are known as monks practice their art, martial arts. They focus their minds and bodies, honing to near perfect mastery. A master of psionic fighting arts that allow them to deliver psychic forces with their punches, the force of a giant's club, and absorb the attacks of heavily armed enemies. The basic versions that they have, for example, builds are Centered Breath and Stone Fist monks. Alright. Implements. They have implements that they channel their psychic energy through called Key Focus. So you'll have to look into, they do have a type of implement, but they do have 5 abilities to talk about. First off, well, 4 abilities. Well, 3 abilities. I'm sorry, 3 abilities. First off is your monastic tradition. It's I counted 3 different things. It's one big thing. Basically, your style. It's the style you choose. You either choose Center Breath or Stone Fist. The choice grants you a flurry of blows power and defensive benefit. So, yeah. Effectively, you get 1 of 2 at will flurry of blows, and then, yeah. Center Breath gives you the centered flurry of blows and gives you a +1 bonus to fortitude that goes up. Stone Fist gives you the Stone Fist flurry of blows and bonuses to will. And basically, each of them has a various style that you can read up on. I'm not going to go into details about that because, again, I want to keep this a relatively short. But if you want to read up on what it means to be a Centered Breath or Stone Fist, you can. You get Unarmed Combatant, which in this case, when you make a melee attack, such as a basic melee attack, you can use a Monk's Unarmed Strike, which is a weapon in the unarmed weapon group. This weapon has the offhand property and +3 proficiency bonus and deals 1d8 damage. You must have a free hand to use the Monk Unarmed Strike. If you're kicking, kneeing, elbowing, headbutting the target, even if you're doing one of those, you still have to have one hand free. Your monk's unarmed strike can be turned into a magic weapon and can benefit from the magic key focus, if you have one. Thanks, motorcycles. It's warm out today, so they're zooming through at high speeds through town. 25 miles per hour. Unarmored defense you also get. When you're wearing cloth armor or no armor and aren't using a shield, get +2 bonus to AC. So get a little bonus to AC if you're doing that there. There are specific rules for weapons and stuff for monks too, so I would recommend reading into those, depending on that. But honestly speaking, that kind of gives you an idea. I'll explain to you, like, the flurries basically allows you to hit a target during a turn with an attack. And if you level, you can hit more creatures. And the target takes damage equal to 2 plus your wisdom modifier. You slide the target 1 square. Okay, so the flurry, basically they're free actions that you do on top of when you hit something with an attack. I use a different attack, and I use the flurry on top of it, which in the case the centered one does some extra damage and shifts something. So it's basically like an extra little hit of damage that you're doing as part of it. So it's a little different than, let's say, when we're talking about some of the other strikers that do extra damage. This one is more controller. You have a secondary role of a controller as a monk. You're a striker with a little bit of controller. So that's why something like centered, slide stuff, Stone Fist, basically does extra damage a little bit more than the other one. And if it wasn't targeted by the triggering attack, you deal extra damage. Basically, if it was an open area. That's kind of hard to explain. You would have to check them. But effectively, your flurry is an add-on on top that does a little extra damage, has an effect. That's monk. I hope I'm explaining that right. You know, sometimes it's like a little difficult to explain things sometimes. So now I'm going to go to a book that's a little bit more unusual to talk about, as I haven't talked about it before. Go figure. I don't know, I might have talked about this one before, but nonetheless. We are turning to, out of the Player's Handbooks, to the Heroes of the Fallen Lands to talk about 2 alternate builds, basically. From the Heroes of the Fallen Lands, there is the Slayer and the Thief. Well, what are these? The Slayer is a fighter build. It's an alternate version of a fighter that makes a fighter a striker. The Thief is just another rogue striker, but it's slightly different here. Strength and dexterity are kill ability scores. They're legendary warriors. Slayers are the heroes of battle. They're shock troopers, forefronters of battle, using cunning mastery, hitting things straight up, often on the borders of civilization. Hit points are 15 plus con modifier, 6 each time you level, bonuses to fortitude, 9 plus con for healing surges. There is some differences between a normal Slayer and a fighter. You get, at first level, Heroic Slayer, Weapon Talent, Fighter Stances, Power Strikes. And then you go through the rest of your first 10 levels. So, yeah, it's just the first 10 levels that are a little different. You know, Heroic Slayer, you gain a bonus to damage rolls of weapon attacks, the bonus equal to your dex modifier. Weapon Talent, you have the ability to... you have insight into all types of weapons, ability to use them. You gain a +1 to attack rolls to weapon attacks. Fighter Stances, you either get... there's a bunch of basically power stances that they have. You gain 2 of the following ones. You choose from a list. The examples they give here are Duelist, Battle Wrath, Berserk Charge, Duelist Assault, Mobile Blade, Poised Assault, Unfettered Fury. You choose 2 of them. And then you also get Power Strike Power, which is an encounter power, as a free action. which is very similar to what the monk did. You hit an enemy with a basic melee attack, and it takes an extra 1 weapon damage. And hit an enemy with a melee basic attack using a weapon. And to that, you do an extra weapon of damage from the triggering attack. And it goes up. So it's effectively as just you do extra weapon damage as a encounter free action. On top of all the other stuff you have, which are basically at-will abilities. So your fighter stances are the main things that you're going to be doing, which is a stance. You enter into a stance, and it gives you a bonus. So you're a little bit of monk, you're a little bit of barbarian, and you're a little bit of fighter still. That's what a slayer is, interestingly enough. Then we turn to the thief. The thief is still a rogue. It is a slightly different build from your average rogue. 12 plus con hit points, 5 each time you level. Bonus to reflex, 6 plus con for healing surges. Agility, trickery, strength, dex, strength, or charisma are your things. So dex is your main thing, with strength or charisma afterwards. Adventurers, explorers, all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about their ability. They, of course, get sneak attack. It functions just like the sneak attack of your average rogue, which you talked about earlier. But they get an additional abilities instead. They get backstab, weapon finesse, first strike, and rogue trick. Rogue trick, basically from a list of abilities, you get to choose 2 of them, and they are at-will abilities that can give you utility abilities. They are unbalancing trick, tumbling trick, thugs tricks, tactical trick, sneaks tricks, fainting tricks, escape artist trick, ambush trick, acrobats trick. They grant you something. As I said, you also get backstab, which is an encounter ability. It's a free action that you gain basically plus 3 power bonus to an attack roll, and the enemy takes 1 extra 6 worth of damage for its hit, which, you know, is again another basic weapon attack. You gain a bonus that you had a combat advantage. They get weapon finesse. It's basically if you make a basic melee, you can use dex instead of strength to attacks and damage rolls. And you get bonuses for using plus 2 damage bonus for using light blades, hand crossbows, short blows, and swings. First strike, combat advantage, something that's not acted first, same as a rogue. So it's basically a slightly different rogue build that gets some slightly different abilities. And after that, you would choose powers, basically, as normal for your things. It's just that certain levels, you might also get other additional things that you would want to check out for this one. Basically, it's a thief heroic tier. It's a different thing than your average rogue. Alright. Those are the classes I can talk about. Now, I will list off, there are some other classes which are out there, and I'll tell you their sources. First off, which unfortunately I'm not going to go into detail today, especially this one's really hard. It's an assassin. It's in one of the Dragon magazines. I don't have Dragon magazines. From September 2009, issue 379 had the assassin. It's a type of striker. Okay, cool. There's also some books that are harder to find, which might be, you might want to look into for more of them. There is the Scout Ranger, which appears in the Heroes of the Forgotten Kingdoms book. Again, this is more of a martial and primal version of a ranger. Remember, the original ranger was just martial. This is martial and primal. It's going to have certainly slightly different abilities, I would say, compared to the rogue thief I gave you there, or the fighter slayer, how they are unique versions of those early classes that they kind of came into. This is something that they experimented with in this area in 2010. You also have, of course, the Hexblade, which Hexblade is a Warlock build. That's a Hexblade there, if you want to check one out. Again, it's from the exact same book. If you want to check it out, Heroes of Forgotten Kingdoms has that. Also from Heroes of Shadow are 3 builds, 2 unique builds, and a class. First off, we have the Executioner. The Execution, of course, from Heroes of Shadow is an assassin build. Interestingly enough, hey, Blackguard are evil paladins from Heroes of the Shadow. I'm guessing it's less evil than it would be in your traditional Blackguard, but I'm curious as to what it is. Again, I don't have Heroes of Shadow as a book, and, I can't really get into detail, but it is a build. And interestingly enough, also in here, there was a vampire class. So that's just a class, a striker class, that uses Shadow. Basically a source introduced in Heroes of Shadow. Finally, from Heroes of Elemental Chaos, we have the Elementalist Sorcerer, which this is a, it's on the DM's Guild. If you want to look this up, you can actually get this specific paper downloaded. I didn't buy it, but today, because I didn't feel like I needed to with talking about sorcerers before. It's basically a more elemental energy powered version of Sorcerer. And finally, we will mention, of course, a little bit, I didn't talk about any of the hybrid classes, which there are hybrid classes for most of these. The Executioner, Blackguard, Vampire have hybrid class versions that were introduced in Dragon magazines. Certainly speaking, all the base classes, including Assassin, Monk, and all the others, have hybrid classes. Strangely enough, some of those other ones, the Slayer, Thief, Scout, Hexblade, don't have hybrid rules. But the Executioner, Blackguard, and Vampire did. Interestingly enough, they were all in the same book that came out, Dragon 400, in June of 2011, that came after the Heroes of Shadow book. But hybrid classes were a thing introduced in Player's Handbook 3, where it's different than the feats. You're basically doing two classes at once. It's got rules for it. You're kind of mixing two things. I talked about hybrid classes in one of my previous videos on classes in D&D 4E. I'd say go look that up if you want to know about it. It's the same exact thing. You're choosing between two of them. You could choose two strikers. You could choose striker leader, striker defender, striker controller, Again, it's meant for versatility. It can be good, it can be bad. Versatility is what the point of it there. A lot of things, as we've developed and seen more of these strikers, versatility has been an important thing here, and I think that's something to talk about with strikers. Strikers are very interesting because they have a pretty good use, but they're also not useful. What do I mean by that? Well, if I was to be building an ideal D&D 4E team, I would want a defender and a leader pretty equivalently. Defender would definitely have its places as keeping things focused on it while being able to take a lot of hits and necessarily dishing some out, while your leader type tends to be the one giving some on-the-spot healing and abilities and boosts and stuff like that too. Those are two very useful things that basically can be core aspects. I'm not saying you couldn't deal without those in your D&D 4E teams. It's just that these are roles that are very helpful and help the team out as a whole. Striker is the first point in time where I'm going to say it's selfish. Most of the time. There are some strikers that have little bits of controller, little bits of defender, little bits of leader mixed in with them, which become less selfish. But let's take a look at our original, our rogue, warlock, ranger. They are great in what they do. On-the-spot damage dealing. But they are selfish classes. They don't do a lot for the team other than eliminating enemies. That's the point of them, is to hit and do a lot of damage. And as we can see, we start out with just bonus damage strikes for the first three types of strikers. And as we developed into other types of damages to bonus, extra weapon rolls, bonuses equal to stats, just flat bonuses, maybe multiple hits to try to get accuracy for something like the Avenger. There were lots of experiments on the essence of what is a striker. It's someone that does a lot of single contact damage. And certainly as strikers developed, I feel like that selfishness kind of lessened to a degree that if I was just using first the Player's Handbook 1, honestly speaking, strikers are one that really aren't necessarily needed. Aren't there as a requirement for a team. They are very useful for a team because, certainly speaking, taking out key enemies is very helpful. dealing a lot of damage, striking and taking out a specific target which might be more of a threat than other targets, has its uses in a tactical combat system like D&D 4e. But you have to think that this is a tactical combat system. It's why a battle board is required for D&D 4e. Positioning and tactics matter heavily. And a striker is a selfish individual, meaning you... Again, it's not that you aren't important. It's not that you can't be very useful for a team. But if we compare the others, I kind of get the feeling Striker is less important than those other two already. Now, we haven't talked about controllers at all. That's going to be my last one of these things that I go through. But just keep in mind that controller is even a different kind of thing. And it's not that controllers aren't helpful. It's, you have to remember, there was one controller in the original Player's Handbook. A single one. And others weren't introduced. And it tells you that's not that controllers aren't useful, but they are very optional. Because when you only had Wizard, and not every team had a Wizard, and worked just fine, tells you how important the aspect of a controller really is. The controller is helpful, sort of. But we're now kind of seeing the importance of it. The importance of these classes when it comes to your teams. You could just play with a team of leaders and defenders. You could probably play maybe with a team of all strikers. I don't think you could play with a team of all controllers. And even the team of all strikers is difficult. Maybe doing some of those strikers that can take slightly different roles. A striker that's also a little bit of a controller. A striker that's also a little bit of a leader. A striker that's also a little bit of a defender. Will allow you to have that team of Oops All strikers. But certainly, I mean, Oops All leaders probably would be great too, because you're not doing a lot of damage. But, you know, Oops All defenders also. Like, also, variety in amongst your teams helps a lot, you know. It's, what class you take really can be up to you, but having some... This is an essence and a system where having a little bit of each of these does help. At very least, having a leader, defender, and a striker will mean your team will be fairly well balanced. Again, that striker, I'm saying it's not 100%. It's not 100% required, but it is so helpful to have. And then the controllers, unfortunately, the optional one. So if you have more than 4 players, you can double up on something. I need more than 3 players. Again, this is kind of diving into the essence of all the character roles a little bit too, and how the character roles in a way aren't built equally when it comes to the tactical nature of the system. You know, and just keep that in mind. It's an interesting thought to keep in mind. But we'll leave it here for today. Again, we'll finish up, and I will hit up the controllers to finish up next time I talk about this. There are there are like 5 main controllers, and then a bunch of alternate like build controllers and a bunch of hybrids, and that's it. There aren't done controllers. There aren't a lot of them. Again, can be so helpful, but just aren't needed the same way. If you want to remember, check out more of this stuff, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, alternate day of Saturday. If I missed something, for these talks I'm on tabletop, up on Twitch. Always goes up on YouTube later on, though. Excuse me. Forgetting my shout-outs here. Discord, Twitter, link down below. Check out all my other stuff. Crimson Queen Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Live play of Pathfinder 1st Edition. Really fun. Discussing Tabletop Saturdays at 6 p.m. Tabletop discussion show. We talk about news of the week and more. I think it's all the shout-outs I can think of. It's been a late day. A lot of motorcycles driving around. Hope everybody enjoyed learning about this. And the next time we talk about tabletop like this, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.